Hello, Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty here from FedEx Field in technically Landover, Maryland, but Washington, D.C., Washington Commanders, who have just defeated the Green Bay Packers 23-21, dropping the Packers to 3-4. Pete, we knew coming into this game there was technically a chance. There's always a chance, but if there was a get right game on the Packers schedule, it was this one, and they didn't get right, especially in the second half. I mean, is this kind of just who the Packers are now?
Yeah, you certainly have to wonder. They in 2016 they came out of this place. They lost their fourth straight game, and they were 5-5. And the next week, on Wednesday, at his locker, Aaron Rodgers said, "I think we're going to run the table, go to the playoffs." They won six straight, won two more, made it to the NFC Championship game. But this feels way different than that did. I mean, they had good weapons. Rodgers was 32 years old. They had weapons on offense. They had Jordy Nelson. Um, Adams was starting to come into his own that year. They just after that game got Jared Cook back, who was a pretty talented tight end. This year just feels a lot different, and doesn't mean they can't turn it around. I mean, 3-4 things look really bleak. I'm not picking that they're turning it around, but they still could. But it just looks, I don't know what you think, but it looks pretty bleak right now.
Right. I mean, and you want to say, well, they have moments and they have guys because it still sounds weird to think to count Aaron Rodgers out. But it feels like on offense, they have some guys that might be good in the future, and they have some guys that are serviceable, but their only star, it feels like, is Aaron Jones. And we saw their only real success on offense came today when they would give him touches. He scored both touchdowns. The second touchdown towards the end of the fourth quarter was just an incredible, incredible catch. Um, but teams know that. They know that that's who's going to be the focus. They know that's who's going to be the feature. By the end of today, the receivers on the field, I believe at the end of the game, were Romeo Dobbs, which is not too surprising, although he had 4 targets and no catches today. Lots of issues there. But Romeo Dobbs, Samari Toure, and Amari Rogers. That was who was on the field as receivers for the Packers. Alan Lazard had a shoulder injury. Randall Cobb is, of course, hurt. Actually, Sammy Watkins was on the field too. That's right. Um, but it doesn't feel like they have enough weapons to spread it out and to make a run. And the defense, you know, lights out in the first half, scored a touchdown for them, almost scored two if it had not been called back for a penalty. But they can only hold on for so long, it feels like.
And they do have Tunyon too, and you and I are of the opinion that by the end of the season he could be the guy with the most catches on this team. So they do have that, and that their defense is playing okay. It's not bad, but it's not the kind of shutdown top five defense that at least I thought it was going to be, both based on paper from the moves we saw them make in the offseason, who they had returning, and also, what they've done, what they did in the draft, all those things. And when in training camp, I mean, they looked pretty good in training camp. And it's not just again, when they played the Saints, they looked good too, although it turns out the Saints ain't so hot either. Um,
And that Bucks win from the beginning of the year is looking less and less impressive.
it is. The one thing that this is as close to as bleak as it gets, with losing to a backup quarterback against a team that, as you rightly said, was a kind of a get right potential team. But this is still the NFL. Aaron Rodgers is still a really talented player. He's not playing nearly as well as he has the last couple of years. So, I mean, I'm not just going to sit here and say they're done. That's it. Season's over. They're not going to the playoffs. No way. I wouldn't say that. But this feels a lot different than like in 16 or other years. I remember when Mike Sherman was the coach one year, they started 1-4. And I remember thinking then, not a deal breaker. There's still a lot of time. You don't feel that way about this team because you just don't see it. Nothing's happening on that offense. I mean, it is a total mess.
And even though they've been in close games and we're again here today, and I know there was a flag that would have negated it anyways, but it felt like one bounce pass away from John Runyon catching it from winning this game. Um, but you're right. Even though they've been in close games, there hasn't been a lot to inspire confidence. We have a ton of questions coming in, so yeah, let's just kind of start with Brian Peterson. What is the issue with second half offense? Pete, I might would argue it's an issue with the first half offense as well.
Yeah, kind of just thinking back to these last three games, it seems like they have one really good drive just in regular kind of down, regular circumstances. And they have one good drive in hurry up, whether at the end of the half or in the end of the game. And that's kind of it.
Their 2 minute offense is the only one that's working.
Yeah. And I would, assuming in part it's working just because defenses are playing soft, right? They're trying to burn time and will give up the yards. So, yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's, a four quarter issue. It's, what they score 2 touchdowns today. What was it last week? I can't even, was it 10 points or 14? It's just, they are just, nothing's working for them. And one of the reasons, I mean, Rodgers is still a really talented guy, can really throw it. He's just, he could carry a team making plays on the move when he was younger. I'm not sure he can do that anymore. Maybe he can, and maybe we'll find out in the coming weeks. But he's 38. He's not 33, and I don't think he's quite mobile enough. So I don't know that that's a winning formula for them either. But he did make some plays out of the pocket in that last drive, that hurry up drive. So maybe that is the way. I don't know.
He had a great deep ball as well to Amari Rogers that was dropped.
Yeah, what I don't know if you kept track of drops. I think I was counting them up after I had at least 6 or 7 drops, and I also had 3 key bad throws by him too. So
The one to Tunyon that could have been a touchdown, that was a bad throw, not a. I don't know if I'd say it's a touchdown. It was a bad throw, not a drop. Over the middle, it wouldn't have been a touchdown. I'm going too far.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of like the one to Dobbs. I think it was no, it was to Watson, where if the ball just had been even remotely Watkins, I mean, if it had been remotely catchable, it would have been a pass interference penalty. But because it was uncatchable, they picked up the flag. He had one on a big third down in the second half to Dobbs, where he threw it at his feet. He had one to Aaron Jones on a third down, I think, in the first half, where if he just hit him in stride, it was a long third and long, but I think he probably gets the first down. He can run for it, but instead he threw a really bad throw, and Jones had to make an acrobatic catch. And by the time he collects himself, he's getting tackled. So Rodgers has not been as sharp as he looked, for instance, in training camp.
Levi says Amari Rogers should never field punts again.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, he gave them 3 points in a 2-point game.
Yeah, and it was lucky. I mean, the defense did get the stop there. They rose. They kept him out of the end zone. That's all you could ask for. I agree. I'll be really, really surprised if he's returning punts again next week.
Because this has now been a consistent issue. And remember, and we've said every time, eventually it's going to cost them. Eventually it's going to cost them. Well, it cost them big today.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there one, I think there was a punt later where you could tell he wanted no business catching it, where he probably should have fair caught it at the 10. That's where they downed it at the 1, right? Yeah.
Let's see. There's actually a lot of questions in here about a lot of comments about Amari Rogers. Levi also asked, why is Dylan on the field over Jones on 4th and 1? And what was Sammy doing? Sammy, I'm assuming, was that on the deep ball, but he drew a defensive pass interference. Actually, no, he didn't, because it was deemed uncatchable.
Right, but it would have been.
Right.
I think the throw was the issue there.
Right. But Dylan being on the field over Jones on a 4th and 1, are you okay with that call?
No, I would have had 33 out there. He's their, I'm sure maybe it was because he's their short yardage guy. And so to get Washington thinking that it was going to be a run, because they end up throwing the ball on that play, correct? The quick out to Dobbs, and he dropped that one too. Right. That was one of the drops. So I'm thinking that's why he was out there. But no, I'm always putting, when you got to have it, I'm putting 33 out there.
And then Brian says, if the offense could stay on the field, the defense would be better too. Need them to get a break. I mean, that seems pretty fair to say. They're playing the complete opposite of complementary football, which is what we said last week as well.
It does. But then, I remember we were sitting there and Washington took the ball down, long drive, and scored. And you looked at it and you go, oh my gosh, That was a 9-minute drive.
Yes.
The defense has got to get itself off the field too. So, it does cut both ways. But yeah, what does seem to happen is the defense holds up for a while and then breaks in the second half.
Matt Rogers has a couple of questions in here. I'm gonna find one again. Um, about Aaron Rodgers and is he being pushed correctly or being pushed enough on his play? Um, do you feel like he's being pushed? And if so, is he taking the responsibility? And how much of it is Aaron Rodgers' fault?
By push by
Media.
um, I think so. I mean, he was asked about his play today. Now today, last week he said he needs to pick it up a tick, which I think was an understatement. Today there was nothing like that. It was more talking about the drops. I mean, he brought those up a couple times, and like I said, I thought he had some responsibility today. He's missing throws that he wasn't missing the last couple seasons, and if the margin is error is less for the receivers and all those guys for drops, the margins of error is less for him for missing, easier throws too. And at least two of those throws were, the throw to Jones on the wing and the short one to Dobbs on a 3rd and 2 in the second half. That was, right at his toes. Those are pretty easy throws.
Yeah, you're right. It was on as his toes. He tried to bring it back up and secure it and just couldn't in time. Um, let me find another one in here. Cindy says they better find a receiver that can catch the ball. Maybe trade Amari since he can't catch punts. I mean, Amari did remind us today that despite a couple of different times, he's still a serviceable receiver. So could a receiver needy team possibly reach out about Amari and trade for someone that needs?
No, nobody's going to give up. Why would anybody give up anything for him? I mean, they
Well,
watch all the film, right? So I just can't imagine because who's more receiver needy than the Green Bay Packers? So no, they'd have to trade a draft pick. I mean I agree they're going to have to go get somebody. The trade deadline's a week from Tuesday, right? So yeah, it's November 1st. So unless a week from now they feel like it would just be throwing good money after bad, I think they're going to have to go get somebody. I have trouble seeing them trading more anything higher than a 3, and I'm not even sure they'd go that high. Like I don't know if that get Chase Claypool. Would a 3 get him? Would they give up a 3 for him for a year and a third or whatever it would turn out to be? If they still think they have a chance and that somebody, a pretty decent receiver, could make a difference, then they have to make a move. Obviously, they're not going to get a great receiver. The teams aren't trading those guys.
And there are lots of questions in here too about going after a receiver. Do you see? So you think a third with maybe a 4th and a player? Like, what's the most aggressive you would see Goody actually being?
I'm thinking a 3 is as high as he would go, and I'm not even sure about that. But for the right guy, maybe he would. Maybe for Claypool, it's a pretty talented guy. Maybe he'd give that up. But that's a high pick, and they value those. They're not going to give up too much. But I could see him giving a 3 or 2 later picks, something like that, for somebody who's made their share of plays in the league and isn't too old.
There are several comments as well in here that on that 4th and 1 screen to Dobbs that Sammy Watkins didn't block it.
I did not see that.
I didn't notice that either, but we can go back and watch that.
Yeah. All I saw was the ball hit his hands. He kind of got hit by the guy, but it was still his hands. From what I could tell, his hands were clean, his arms were clean, and that has to go as a drop. But no, I did not see what Watkins did or did not do there.
To be fair, too, where our press box seats are in this stadium, anything past this 35-yard line, you can't really tell what's going on, unfortunately. And it's raining pretty hard too right now, which is why we're not outside. But yeah, it's a little difficult to kind of see what's going on that far down the field.
Basically in the back corner of one of the end zones, and it's a really poor view unless the ball's pretty far down on that end of the field, and then it's a great view.
Steve says every week they say they need to run the ball more. Why doesn't that happen?
I don't feel like that was the problem today. I don't know if you do.
And it can be a little deceiving when you look at the box score because let me see, we've got it right here.
A couple of those Aaron Jones catches were basically just tosses.
Right. And because you look at the thing and it says that Aaron Jones had you know, 8 rush attempts and AJ Dillon had 4, so that's 12, but Aaron Jones also was the leading receiver. He had 9 receptions and like you said some of those were runs. His first touchdown, it went down as a passing touchdown, but it was a run. Pass was behind the line of scrimmage. Um and so do you feel like this is the level of involvement and the type of involvement you need to see Aaron Jones in this offense?
It was a lot closer to it. Yeah, I mean he's so clearly their best guy, you know, with the ball in his hands. So it's getting closer after that first quarter. He had 8 touches, and I thought, wow, this is looking like kind of the offense that we were expecting most of the season. But then things just kind of shut down from there.
Randy asked if there are any updates on Lazard and Gary. Lazard went out with a shoulder injury. When we walked in the locker room, he was sitting there with one of those little shock things on, and he was wrapped up in ice. It was his left shoulder. Gary left the game with a concussion. When he was walking off the field, he was holding his arm. At first, I thought maybe it was like a shoulder or something, and then they said concussion, and I thought, well, maybe he was having the fencing reaction.
Yeah, or I wonder. Oh, that could have been. I wonder if maybe he got a stinger where he got hit in the head, but also where his neck, so he got the shoulder stinger too, and then his arm went dead. But yeah, it could have been either of those. He was not on the field there for that last drive, which didn't help him.
Right. They technically, the 9-minute drive.
No, well, no, on the one in the last 3 minutes when they couldn't get the last 2 minutes when they basically didn't get the stop until 40 seconds left or whatever, 30 seconds.
Levi asked, how do they fix the run D? Because it gashed them again today with Brian Robinson and Samuel.
It did. I guess, are you of the opinion that the defense lost the game? I mean, the defense gave them 7 points. They're not the borderline. Shutdown is too strong a term because there aren't really shutdown defenses in the NFL. They're pretty rare, and when they are, those teams have a really good shot at winning the Super Bowl. But I thought this would be a top 5 defense that would get a lot of key stops, and they're not getting that. And it seems like their run defense is kind of breaking down in the second half of games. Some of those they get 91 and 52. One of those guys comes out because they got to rest those guys, and then their end gets caved in. And actually today, Rashawn Gary gave up two long runs on the outside, like a 20-yarder and a 14-yarder, where he just got caught inside, and the run went right outside him.
Let's flip to the other side of the trenches. Robert asked, what do you think of the O-line play today?
I thought it was fine. They, from what I could tell, and Rob Domofsky of ESPN was tweeting this a couple times during the game, that up until through like the end of the third quarter, Washington did not blitz at all. So they didn't get challenged on any of that blitz pickup stuff. I'm not even sure how much stunting they were doing. So it wasn't a huge test that way, but they do have some talented rushers. But I thought the protection was fine. I mean, Roger certainly wasn't getting hit like he did the week before, and he wasn't running for his life. And actually, when he started making plays outside the pocket in that last drive, that's as good as the offense looked all day.
And then Bakhtiari did not play today. He was a late addition to the injury report on Saturday. Pete, they told us a few weeks ago that David Bakhtiari would probably not have to ever practice 3 days a week ever again. And then this week, they practiced him 3 days a week. He didn't play today. Not quite sure if there's a correlation there. Were you able to get any clarification on why he wasn't able to play today specifically, and what would have been the issue?
No, they didn't say anything. I think it's the last couple weeks he's played. He's practiced 3 days, right? I think it was the last 2 weeks he did. But it's a really bad sign going forward that this is still cropping up for him, and it just kind of seems like it's just going to be week to week, and some weeks they may not have him. No, and so then they got maybe Zach Tom is now their left tackle for when if Bakhtiari doesn't play, it's Zach Tom at left tackle. It's kind of looking that. I mean, I'll have to go back and watch and tomorrow, but it seemed like he played okay.
Mike says Darnell Savage is undersized. I, I didn't feel like he played bad today. I mean, do you think that is there an issue there at safety? Is this one of those things where they should get Rudy Ford on the field more, or is Darnell Savage okay back there?
I can't say I noticed any really bad plays by him, except for there was one a short yardage run where he ended up behind the play, and he pushed the pile to knock the guy down. He pushed it forward. I think they had just barely gotten the first down anyway, but he pushed it forward like 2 yards. But I can't say that he did anything today that jumped out as me that he was a problem.
Darnell Savage is a good transition to one other thing we need to talk about because he forced a fumble on Brian Robinson. It was a little confusing the way it was explained because it was explained differently the first time, and then let me rephrase. It was explained one way, and then they said the call stands, and then they explained it a different way. Essentially, Darnell Savage forced the fumble on Brian Robinson, and then they said that Brian Robinson was able to gain control back before he hit the ground, which sounds a little confusing as well.
Oh, because you know what? I missed that part of the announcement. I might have been consulting with somebody next to me or something. So I didn't hear that part of it.
Right, because they said the call stands, and then he came back on the mic and explained it and said that there was a fumble recovered by Washington. And so Darnell Savage spoke about that in the locker room afterwards. I asked him about it, and he said, I knew for a fact that he fumbled it and that we had it. And that was something Matt LaFleur challenged, and he lost. So do you think, one, it was a good challenge? And then I have a second part of this question as well.
It was definitely, I thought it was worth challenging, although, I mean, it's risky because if you don't get it, then you're out of challenges for the rest of the game, but it would have been a huge play. But after watching the replay over and over and over, I get why they didn't overturn it, because even though I think it looked like he never really fully had the ball after he fumbled it, I don't know if it was definitive. And if they're still going by clear and definitive, then I could see why they said that, not to overturn it.
They didn't have enough evidence there to really overturn it. But Darnell Savage forcing that fumble made me think about this because we saw in the first half, it felt like Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas were both just right there to grab an interception a few different times. Should have had three between them. And then Devondre Campbell rips one away, returns it for a pick six. Savage was able to force that fumble there. It felt like they knew that the takeaways had been a problem and that they were really going after the ball today.
Well, Taylor Heineke early was really, really shaky. I think they had, so I don't know on that one out early, did Douglas have a chance at intercepting that, or I don't know if he did or not. But really early, there was that quick out. They were way down at the far end, and they threw a quick out, and Douglas came up, and the guy caught it, but they tackled him pretty quickly. But Douglas overran the play even. I don't know if he actually had a good shot at that ball or not. I never saw a replay to see. But Alexander had a great shot at one. Douglas had a great shot at least one other. I mean, the one went, these were just bad throws. They had the high one where he kind of just threw it up for grabs because he got hit, Heineke. I think there was at least three other passes that were eminently interceptable, especially the one with Alexander over the middle, went right through his hands. And that was in the first half. The guy, Heineke, was really shaky, and he gave him a lot of chances, and they got to make those plays because any one of those plays could have really turned this game into giving them a big lead early and kind of not put it away, but gone a big step towards putting it away. And then in the second half, the guy played a lot better and didn't give him those chances.
And then they had another turnover that was returned for a touchdown by Rasul Douglas, and it was called back for a penalty. I asked Eric Stokes about it in the locker room afterwards because it seemed, at least to me, to be kind of a ticky-tacky foul.
It looked very ticky-tacky, yeah. Right. What did he say?
He said that he was told, I can't touch him on the double move, and I ain't never heard that before. And I asked a few the corners and DBs about it as well, and they all basically said the same thing. I've never heard that explanation or that rule. They were pretty fired up about it as well. Is that just kind of, I guess, the state of the league now where it's going to benefit the offense?
Yeah, I did see a tweet from somebody who said Dean Blandino, explaining that call, said last year, in previous years, there would be like 90 or 100 of those calls by now, and last year there was only like 30, and so that was a point of emphasis for the league this season was to call those. Um, so maybe it was what the league is looking for, but it did look really, really ticky tack to me. But that happens, that happens in the league, and you got to keep playing.
Couple of last questions here. This one from Marcel. Matt is not who we thought he was. Why do we continue to pass on 4th and 1? Pete, I would also point out, I think they passed on every second down they had today except one, based on just my notes. I would need to go back and check that. But let's look at the first part of that question. Is Matt LaFleur who you thought he was? Is he not who you thought he was? What is he right now?
So up until this year, I've been. It sure feels like he's a good offensive coach and a pretty good play caller. And we all remember Aaron Rodgers was kind of struggled in 17 and 18. I think in 17 he had gotten hurt, but he was not. It looked like at least possibly he was starting to decline. LaFleur comes in and he plays better for each of the next 3 years. So LaFleur had to have had something to do with that. He is really struggling to find a rhythm and to get things going. And, it's his offense and Rodgers' offense. It's on those two first and foremost. And so it's up to those two to right the ship.
Pete, I know that you have to ride. I do as well. So we're gonna say goodbye here. But just final thoughts. I was joking with Wes Hodgwitz. Wes Hodgquist. Gosh, I have such a tough name, such a tough time with his name. I need to learn how to get it right. Um, in the locker room afterwards, and I said, "Watch this team go to Buffalo and win next week." And he said, "That's what I was thinking earlier today. He said this would be the year of the team that would just do that. 3 straight losses to 3 teams they should have beat, and then go to Buffalo and beat the Bills. I mean, is that possible?" um, what's your kind of takeaway walking out of Washington of what this Green Bay Packers team is?
That's the kind of weird stuff that happens in this league. And sure, it's definitely possible. I mean, no, I don't think anybody's going to bet on them, and they're going to be a pretty significant underdog. Um, but even if they do go there and win, you still have the red flags that this offense is really struggling. And, one good game, if they play well on offense next week, doesn't just wipe all that away. These issues are going to keep cropping up unless they find something they can hang their hat on. But is it possible? Yeah, of course it's possible. I don't know anybody's going to bet on it, but of course it's possible.
Any given Sunday. Well, we will be there to cover it for you all, and we will continue to have full coverage for you from Washington, D.C., where the Packers have fallen to the Washington Commanders and have fallen to 3-4 on their season, below 500, heading into an incredibly difficult game in Buffalo next week. We already have a couple of stories up on PackersNews.com, so go check those out, and then stay tuned for full coverage as we wrap up Packers versus Commanders. Pete, thanks so much. Thanks, guys.